last week, we made our way around the wall, and if you weren't here, it's probably a good thing, because this stuff's blowing all over the place. But we made our way around the wall. We saw different people working in different sections on the wall, a variety of different people, and it said 35 times that they made repairs, and we looked at what that actually says in the Hebrew. It's the Hebrew word kazak, which means that they were strengthening, they were fortifying, they were making resolute and making courageous the wall. So they were building it up, and we talked about how it's kind of like the presidential limousine, where you take a regular Cadillac and then you turn it into a Kazakh-a-lac. For the presidential limousine, they take it and they just beef that thing up. They put bulletproof glass and smoke grenades and oil slick mechanisms, just like a James Bond car. So they beef it up. They strengthen it. They fortify it. They make it resolute and immovable. And that's what they were doing to the wall around Jerusalem. And I think as they were building, I didn't mention this last week. This is probably why it's just best to come for the recap, and then you can just leave if you want. You know, you get that first 5 minutes, but I think that as they were building and fortifying the walls, they were also being fortified themselves. They were also being built themselves as they were doing that they were being made resolute, that they were being made courageous as they trusted and followed God in this project. So they're building the walls, and in doing that, they themselves were in fact being built. So there were all kinds of different people involved. There were priests, there were rulers, there were workers, perfumers, goldsmiths, lots of people that weren't professional wall builders. There were people in groups of people that may not have had a lot in common with some of the others. But they were unified in this act of serving God and building, so that their differences were moved to the background. They were unified in this one thing. They were able to take their differences, move them to the background, so that they could focus on what was really important and have unity as they served God and served each other in this building project. So they found themselves with their God in common, and they worked together on something that was bigger than their differences. Some of the builders had opportunity to build sections that were like right by their house. Like it says right in front of their house. The priests had a section that was right in front of the house. Lots of these dudes had their houses right there at the wall, which showed us that sometimes you don't have to go far to build something for God. You just step out your house and there's something to do, something to build for God right there. And then they reaped, like extra benefit because they lived there. So it was good to have that big old wall, keep people from walking right on through, marauding right into town and into your house. And then there were a lot of names and a lot of the parts of the wall that they built. We read through all that, and that was dry. But we got through it. That man. And just to show you, for those of you who weren't here, I'm going to read through it again. No, I'm kidding. But we did give you the map, which does help to make sense of it all. You can see some of the names. You can see the names of the gates and where they are. And Nehemiah was just giving, in his writing, a tour around the wall, from where he started and, gate to gate, around counterclockwise or clockwise around the wall. And you can see where all that stuff is at, and it helps you to make a little sense of it. So we're going to move on today in Nehemiah chapter 4. So open your Bible if you have it, and if you're following along that way. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1. Cue the bad guy music. Dun, dun, dun. They're back. We had these bad guys. They just keep popping up. And they mock, they ridicule, like, what are you guys doing? You're stupid. And, they just keep showing up from time to time. They're back. They're back today. So Nehemiah 4:1. When Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their walls of stones." So when Sanballat heard that they were actually rebuilding, he was angry and greatly incensed. Nehemiah and the builders, Nehemiah and those following him in this project for God, they did not back down. They did not get embarrassed. They didn't retreat from the job that God had put in front of them. They kept going. They did it. And so as they did what God called them to do, and these guys saw that, and they, remember that they had done pretty good. They were definitely under the Persian Empire. They were under the thumb of that, but they had worked an angle to where they were doing pretty good. They were making bank on this situation by exploiting the Jews, by exploiting the fact that there were no walls in Jerusalem. So they were just walking right in, and they were exploiting that. So when the exploiters don't get their way, and they can't exploit anymore, they feel control slipping away, and they get angry. If you've ever had that, where somebody's like holding something over you, and you're like, no, not anymore. And when they feel that control over you slipping away, they get angry. That's what happens. So angry, in the Hebrew, it means fuming mad. He was on fire. Sanballat was just on fire in a conflagration of anger. And greatly incensed means vexed and provoked to anger. So here we have, again, these two words kind of side by side that are synonyms, mean almost the same thing. And you're doubling down on these concepts to show how mad he was. He was mad, and he was ticked, too. So, that's Sanballat. He was mad, and he was ticked. And who here knows that interacting with anyone from a place of being burning up with anger is not a good way to interact with people? If you don't know that, you will find out someday. That you'll say words you can't take back, and it's not a good place to come at a conversation, to be burning up with anger. Rarely ever, if ever, constructive. And so he's angry, and he's ticked, and he starts to ridicule the Jews again in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria. Chuck Swindoll said that critics run with critics. Critics run with critics. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but when you get somebody that's ganging up to make fun of somebody else, if they'll gather as many people that agree with them around them as they can. And so they've got their little echo chamber, and they're all agreeing, yeah, these guys are stupid. And that's what had happened. There's strength and safety in numbers, even when you're on the wrong side of something. So he gathered a bunch of people that had the same opinion he did, and he started in with the mockery. Again, what are these feeble Jews doing? That's mean. That's just mean. What are these feeble Jews doing? Are these weaklings? Are they going to rebuild their wall? Are these little pansies going to offer sacrifices? Are they going to build this thing in a day? Look at them go. They're like just building so hard, like they're going to get this done in a day. And can these idiots bring these stones back to life? These stones that have been burned. Can they bring them back from the heaps of rubble, even though they've been burned? Now, someone trained in some environmental sciences and a little bit of chemistry, I'm like, well, how can the stones get burned? Right? Who has ever sat around in the campfire and it's like, oh man, we got to get some more rocks. The rocks caught on fire and burned up. The granite, it gets a little smoky and looks like it's been in the fire, but it doesn't get consumed. It's a nice little barrier to keep the fire where you want it. That made some questions for me. So I looked that up. And what does it mean that the rocks are burned? I thought, what was this wall made out of? And so I looked in it, and it was made out of what they call Jerusalem stone, which is a kind of limestone. And we've got limestone around here. It's a, sedimentary rock formed underwater, and when you heat it and compress it in the ground, it turns into marble. We've got that out in Colombia. There's lots of places you can go see raw marble that's been washed, the dirt's been washed away from it. But when you take this Jerusalem stone, Goosen. Hey guys, aren't they going the wrong way? I guess I won't correct them. So anyway, the Jerusalem stone, the limestone, when you do set it on fire, when it encounters heat, it does change chemically. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. It turns from calcium carbonate, which is limestone and is also marble, and it turns from that into calcium oxide, which is kind of a more loose, powdery substance that is irritating to your lungs and your mucous membranes. So apparently, as the gates had burned, it had taken some of the raw materials around there and it had burned it and turned it into this calcium oxide, which throws a whole new occupational hazard on the building project now, doesn't it? apparently they lost some of the useful stone. I'd imagine they're going through like reclaiming and repurposing out of the rubble as they could, find, oh, this one's still good. We'll use this one. And then around the gates, there's this powder, this stuff is terrible, and so threw that occupational hazard thing in there. In fact, I was reading that somebody back when had used this as like an early form of chemical weaponry, this stuff, because it was, it was irritating to your mucous membranes, your lungs, not a good thing to be around. And so he's poking fun at them. They're out there probably coughing and hacking up, digging around this stuff. I'm like, are they going to bring these rocks back from the rubble? Can they do that? Can they bring the rocks back to life? And then he made a mistake, though, Sanballat. He called it their wall. Can they rebuild their wall? It's not their wall. And I don't think they thought it was their wall. It was God's wall being rebuilt for their benefit. So he wasn't really fighting against these guys. He's fighting against God. And then Tobiah chimes in. Even if a fox climbs up those walls, they're going to crumble. They're going to fall down. If a little old fox climbs up there. And yes, a fox could climb a wall. I don't know if you knew this, but foxes can climb trees. They can go like vertical. And they're little. And a little tiny fox, even this little tiny fox scurries up this wall. Oh, it's going to fall down. It's going to crumble. These guys are idiots. They don't know what they're doing. So the mockery has begun afresh. So what does Nehemiah do? He prays. Verse 4, hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as a plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. So he prays again. That's pretty harsh, huh? No. And we're going to talk about that. So he prays. And this is the third prayer we've encountered in this book so far that is on display for us. Nehemiah's third prayer. The first one was a prayer of desperation, of brokenness, of grieving, and of depression when he found out what was going on. When his brothers came to visit and they're like, man, it's bad. It's bad back in the old town, man. It's bad and it's terrible. And that depressed him. It made him grieve. And so the first one was coming at from that place of desperation and brokenness. And like 4 months, he just like dwelt in this prayer. The second prayer we saw was when he's getting ready to talk to the king. And it's that prayer of pivoting on your feet. That prayer you would pray when you're jumping out of an airplane going parachuting. It's like, all right, Lord, here we go. Let the chute open. It's that kind of on your feet thing, and you get in those situations like, all right, Lord, here we go. And it's those prayers that are in action. And now this third one is from yet a different place and a whole other set of circumstances, and sounds way different than the other two, doesn't it? Doesn't sound very Jesus-like. So Nehemiah, he's sick. He's sick of hearing the ridicule. He's sick of hearing from these guys, hearing them talking smack while they're trying to work. And these guys are coming up, these idiots, these pansies, these, what do they think they're doing? He's tired of it. Then Sanballat and Tobiah, they're like the two old guys from the Muppet Show, right? They're always there, and they're always just critical and always hammering with this sarcasm. And, he's getting tired of it. He's tired of hearing from these guys. But once again, he doesn't engage them like they engaged him. And we saw that last time, that he didn't raise up and insult them back. He didn't fight them back, insult for insult. He didn't engage them that way. We mentioned before that operating in ridicule and mockery is not for us to do. That is not becoming to God's people. That is not for us. We do it sometimes. I know. But, we're not supposed to. And if we do, we need to repent. We need to not be doing that. When people insult us, we need to not be coming at them with that same artillery, that same warfare. Nehemiah didn't do it. We shouldn't do it. We aren't allowed to play on their playing field. It's like they're playing football and we're playing hockey. And so we don't get our hockey sticks and our pads and put on our skates and go out to the football field to play. It's a whole different game. It's a whole different league. We have no reason to be there playing on their field. And sometimes we do put on our skates and go out and divot up their field. How do you like me now? But we're not supposed to do that. It's a whole different game. We don't engage them that way. We're not supposed to. The knee-jerk reaction in these cases is to take the situation into our own hands and not talk to God about it. Maybe talk to him after. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, did I do that? Did I take that, into my own hands? That's our knee-jerk reaction. And we should go to him first. We should let him know how we feel. If we're angry, we can let him know, like Nehemiah was doing. Nehemiah expressed his frustration to God, and he held back from going after Sanballat and Tobiah. So his prayer here, it seems more than a little vindictive, doesn't it? You kind of pick that up? It's not a nice prayer. He's not praying for his enemies. He's not praying for their peace and their well-being. It's a little, more than a little vindictive, and it doesn't seem in line with what we would think of as a godly prayer or a Christ-like prayer. His prayer here, and in the commentaries that I was reading, they compare them to what they call, and here's a big word for you, the imprecatory psalms. And what is imprecatory? That just means that you're calling down a curse on someone. There are psalms that are imprecatory, where a curse is being called down. And this presents a hardship for us. This presents a difficulty, doesn't it? As Jesus says to love our enemies, and now we see these, what do we do with that? Psalm 69:24 is one of them. It states, praise to God, pour out your indignation on them and let your burning anger overtake them. That's not very nice. That's imprecatory. We have imprecatory songs in our culture too. You ever hear? It's been years ago, and I know I brought it up before, but there's that old country song, "I'll Pray for You." You guys remember that? I've got some of the words here. I pray your brakes go out running down a hill. I pray a flower pot falls from a windowsill and knocks you in the head like I'd like to. I pray your birthday comes and nobody calls. I pray you're flying high when your engine stalls. I pray your dreams never come true. Just know wherever you are, honey, I pray for you. That's an imprecatory song, right? So yeah, we do it. We still do it. That's not where we're supposed to come from as God's people. But these are there. There are people who say these prayers through the Bible, and some of the commentaries say that they're just effective prayers, that they're showing us how not to pray, and that we should never pray this way. And I don't know that I would go that far. These kind of prayers are included, and they're included in the text. They present a bit of a difficulty, and we can't ignore the difficulties of the Bible and brush them off. We have to deal with them. These things are like puzzles. They're given to us to wrestle with, to help us grow, to figure out, to stretch us and help us to grow and to understand. And so we don't want to shy away from these things when they're difficult. We're going to just take them on and engage them. We're going to do that today. They're trying to teach us something. They're trying to model something for us, whether it's a positive or a negative, like this is how you should pray, this is how you should not pray. Sometimes you should pray this way. I don't know, but it's trying to give us an example. It's trying to show us something. It's trying to impress something on us, and we're going to let that happen. So before we start praying to God, and one of my favorite imprecatory prayers is, I forget which psalm it is, but it's like, God, break their teeth out of their mouths. That's, I never heard Jesus praying that way. But before we start praying for God to break people's teeth out, we need to recognize some things about these imprecatory prayers, and Nehemiah's prayer here would fall into that category. When we look closely at them, number one, they are calculated and measured. They are thoughtful. They are controlled. Comparing Nehemiah's prayer with what the fuming anger of Sanballat and Tobiah were, it's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? There's like a compare and contrast thing going on there. Nehemiah, he turned away. He didn't fire back at him. He turned away. He prayed. He voiced exactly how he was feeling to God, where Sanballat and Tobiah were just like fuming mad and just flying off the handle. So it's, Nehemiah's prayer here is not in a fit of rage. Number two, these prayers are responses to sin and injustice, and they communicate raw and gritty feelings. And I think that's okay sometimes. Sin and injustice should make us angry. I don't know if you've ever seen something that was just so unjust. We did a big fundraiser for Exodus Road, who they go to places in the world and they interrupt human trafficking. They infiltrate. They get in the middle of it. They get to know the people, and then they drop the bomb and put a stop to human trafficking. Because human trafficking, that's one of those things that makes me angry. That's not right. To be able to go and take somebody from their family and from their life and put them into this, like prostitution and coerce them into doing that for their own benefit, that exploitation, that makes me angry. So we should have that righteous indignation. Some of these things should make us a little angry. But Ephesians 4:26 says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. So yes, you will get angry. Sometimes you'll get angry for right things, but in your anger, don't become part of the problem. Don't become part of the problem. So these prayers are a response to knowing and wanting what is good. Number 3, these prayers often have grace tucked into them if you read them closely. If you go back and you read through Nehemiah's prayer again, there's a little bit of grace written in there, tucked in there between the lines. Nehemiah prays, don't let them off the hook. Let them experience what we have. Let them experience being taken over, being plundered, being in captivity. Let them feel what we feel. Let them see through our eyes. Let them feel this as through their hearts and their souls as we have. Let them understand what we've been through living in a land of captivity. And maybe if they understand, that'll change their whole way of thinking. Maybe they will no longer want to stand here and be ridiculing us. Maybe they will understand. And number 4, when people pray these prayers, they are well aware of their motives and not letting themselves off the hook if their motives are less than good. Purity of motive is key. When you see David praying these imprecatory prayers in Psalms, purity of motive is key. If you feel like you need to pray for God to break someone's teeth out, ask yourself this first. All right. Is this prayer appealing to my sense of justice? Is this prayer appealing to a sense of justice to make me feel better? Is this prayer going to, if God, man, if you were like to smite these people and break their teeth out, is that going to give me a little vengeance dopamine hit? Is it going to make me feel good? Right? Is it appealing to my sense of justice, or is it appealing to a higher sense of justice? Is it appealing to God's sense of justice? That's why in Psalms 139, after David prayed, if only you, Lord, would slay the wicked. There you go. He also prays, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Again, keep my motives and my heart in check as I pray this. Don't let me, again, be part of the problem. Don't let me be playing on that same playing field of vengeance. In Luke 9:52 through 55, Jesus sent messengers on ahead who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him, but the people there did not welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven and destroy them? But Jesus turned and rebuked them. Jesus says, no, I don't want that. James and John were being part of the problem. They were being disrespected, and they were raising up, let us call down fire from heaven on these turkeys, right? Just let us do it. You want us to do it? And he's like, no, guys, no. So he rebukes them. They were being part of the problem. Their little feelers were hurt, and they were ready to lash out, and they were ready to hit back, something that Jesus didn't allow for. And Nehemiah isn't doing it here either. So I think there's something we can learn from that. So we're gonna leave that there today. The couple things that I want us to take with us today, including myself, Nehemiah and his crew, they had a freedom granted by the king to do what they were doing with the rebuilding of the wall. I think Sanballat and Tobiah might have realized that by now. Right? They're accusing them of being treasonous against the king when they started to rebuild. Nehemiah didn't bother mentioning that, no, they actually had permission, that he had actually donated building materials to the project. And I'm sure by now they'd used a bunch of time and energy and went running their mouths trying to get him in trouble, and figured out that, no, they did actually have permission from the king, a freedom granted to do what they were doing with this rebuilding project. So their little reign of exploitation over the Jews was coming to an end. They were backed into a corner, and we said that exploiters get angry when they get to the point where they can't exploit anymore. I think we also have freedom granted to us from the King of Kings to be free. Not everyone is going to be stoked about that. Some people will want us to not be free so their own interests will be served. Or so that they'll have they want us to join their little echo chamber. Evangelistic marijuana people. Okay? I'm just going to throw that out there. And if you're going to smoke the hippie cabbage, that's between you and God. I'm going to let you, let God take care of that. But some of these guys no, I don't. They're like, you don't? You need to. Why don't you? You need to try it. Don't you know this stuff? It cures cancer. It makes you prettier. And, they start throwing down all these claims. And no, I don't want that. I'm in my 50s and my brain cells are struggling to survive already. I need all my brain cells that I can muster just to keep going and keep getting up in the morning. And so, no, I'm not going to do that. And there's a community there that doesn't want me to be free on that. It's like, no, you need to do this. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to do it. I'm free. I'm free from that. Or, if you're in something like that and then you break away, there's going to be a group of people if you're drinking too much and you break away from that and you get clean and you get sober, there are going to be people that applaud you, and there are going to be some people that are still back doing that want you back in that with them because it makes them feel okay. It's serving them. So not everyone's going to be stoked about our freedom. So when people look at you and they say, what is that feeble person trying to build now? It's all right. Be free anyway. I just encourage you guys to be free anyway. And then sometimes in the face of injustice, we will be angry. And it's okay. Anger is part of the spectrum of our emotions, part of what God has built into us. And I think it's okay to pray angry, honest, and gritty prayers. I think that's why these prayers are in there. Sometimes even if the heart isn't right and they're praying this judgment to come on to people, they're being honest with God about what they're feeling. And I think it's okay. One of the things about those imprecatory prayers is that at the end, you read through it, it always leaves the final word, the final judgment in the hands of God. Not like, God, I think this should happen, so I'm going to go take care of this. It backs off, takes the hands off, leaves it in the hands of God, even if God will not answer the prayer like you want him to. He might have grace and, in store for these people. And so, but it leaves it there with him for him to do what he's going to do. But I think it's okay to pray those angry, honest, and gritty prayers rather than trying to hide our feelings from God. He'd rather have them out in the open so that we can be honest with him, so he can be, deal with us. Now, I don't think these imprecatory prayers should be our go-to when we're waking up in the morning. Wake up, get your feet on the floor. Oh, Lord, break the teeth out of the mouths of my enemies. I don't think that should be our first thought, our first go-to. But there are times when we're gonna see injustice and we're gonna want something better, and it's gonna make us angry and mad, and we're gonna pray. And I think God's all right with that. There's an old Judas Priest song. Too bad Don isn't here. He would know this. The album, Screaming for Vengeance was the name of the album. And I don't think these prayers are screaming for vengeance. I think they're screaming for justice. And that's a whole different vibe. That's a whole different thing. So if you feel the need to pray a prayer like that, check your motives. Leave room for grace. Give the Lord the final word on it. You might have something in mind that you hadn't even thought of yet. So that's a lot to think about today in just a few verses, isn't it? Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the beautiful day that you have given us. Thank you that it has stayed dry, that we got through a study of your word. And Lord, I just ask that what we have seen today, that you would just help us to just let those things rattle around our hearts, Lord. Help us to meditate on them, to think about them, to really digest those into our souls today. And Lord, if we're using the go-to of angry prayer, Lord, I pray that we would check our motives. Maybe it's good to come with a little gratitude first. And Lord, help us to be honest with you, though, when we are feeling this way, when we're angry, when we see injustice, and we feel helpless, we don't know what to do about it, we want something to happen. Lord, help us to just be honest in our prayers with you and then to leave it with you, knowing that you are going to do the right thing, that you are in charge of it all, that you will take care of it, and it's not our place to do, Lord. And Lord, just pray as we go, that we'd be thinking about these, that you would keep us safe during this week. Lord, give us our own little building projects. Help us to ignore and just not engage the people that would come along and say, what are these feeble people trying to build now? Sometimes we walk right out of our houses and there is something we can build, something we can do. Sometimes we walk into our jobs and there's something we can build and something we can do for you. Let us blow off the critics. And if we get angry, let us turn to you in prayer. Let us keep doing what you have put in front of us to do. Just staying true to the building project and the calling that you have put on our lives. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.